Good evening. I'd like to call to order the May 18th Board of Harbor Commissioners meeting to order. Jeanette, would you please call roll?
Yes, Jim Sloan.
Here?
Bill Spicer.
Here.
Betsy Kramer.
Here.
Merritt McRae.
Here.
And Lang Sly is absent tonight.
Okay. Scott, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, no changes this evening.
Okay. And at this time, we usually do public comment. I know we get a lot of that. But that's not on the agenda. So I see that Leslie Wiscombe is here. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. I'm Leslie Wiscombe, and I really just came to introduce myself to you. I apologize. I'm from the Planning Commission, and I'm your liaison. So I apologize for not getting here before now. I got appointed to the Planning Commission in January, and I've really been kind of playing catch-up because it's a lot of work. And so I just wanted to let you know that I'm here for you, and if you have any questions or any problems or things you want to talk about, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to be working with you. I should let you know I was for 7.5 years on the Parks and Recreation Commission, and I was on the subcommittee for the local coastal program update, and now I'm on the subcommittee again on behalf of the Planning Commission. So I think, we have some connections there. I know you're all very interested in the LCP process and how that's going, and so we'll work together, and please let me know if I can help you in any way.
What would be some examples of our commissions that overlap?
Well, definitely LCP.
Right.
And, we are responsible for the issuance of coastal development permits in both appealable and non-appealable zones of the coastal zones.
Right.
And, projects that go on. We actually just saw one today at 926 Indio Muerto, which is a 4-story hotel project. And that required a coastal development permit in the non-appealable zone. Okay. And so I think there's a lot. And with the local coastal program update going on, that's turned into a multi-year process. Right. And so I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for probably interface between Planning and Harbor Commission with that, because we all have, valuable input, I think, to give on
definitely,
that. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, great.
So,
well, thank you.
So please feel free to contact me, and thank you. I'm probably going to buzz out of here now because I've been here since noon, but but I am available, and I will be definitely watching your videos online and looking forward to working with you.
Great. Well, thank you for stopping by.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Let's talk about the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve it, or are there comments on it?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Let's move on to Director's Report. Scott, take it away.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Since we met last month, the Council approved credit card processing agreements and merchant agreements with Gravity Payment Systems for a term of 3 years at a not-to-exceed total of $115,000. And this is credit card processing related to our marina management system, which we're still in the process of implementing. And this will enable us to be payment card industry compliant, so that you can't retain credit card numbers or information any longer. And so this is a third-party company that keeps those numbers and encrypted. That's the word I'm looking for. So that we don't have access to them, so we're PCI compliant. Also approved a 3-year lease agreement with Alexandra Mariansky and Jonathan Turner for a small office space on the second floor of 125 Harbor Way. The Harbor Commission recruitment is underway, and by the closing date of May 1st, we had 3 applicants for 2 vacancies. I've met with one of them. Carl met with another, and I've spoken with the third, and it looks like we've got a good field to draw from. So I think whoever we get, I think any of the 2 of the 3 will be good addition to the commission. They do need to interview with the council, and the last opportunity to do that is next Tuesday at 6 o'clock in the evening. So I haven't seen any of the interviews. I don't know if anybody's interviewed yet, but next Tuesday is the last chance. And then tentative items for the June meeting, we're looking a little light, but we might have some lease agreements to look at, such as the Harbor Market. Also, Harbor Marine Works is coming up soon, as is Santa Barbara Shellfish on the wharf.
Okay.
Those will be pretty demanding negotiations there. So.
Yeah. Good.
And that concludes my report. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
On the credit card processing, that's for transient and slip payments mostly? Is that what it's for, or is it this parking?
No, we already have direct parking. All of our parking
Right.
stuff is
Right.
directly goes right to the bank.
Okay,
And but this is for transient berthing,
right.
particularly up at the front desk, where we used to take the credit card, slide it, and keep it in next to the little visitor card.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, you can't do that anymore.
Right, right.
But a lot of people like to pay their monthly slip fees with the credit card, so they get their airline miles or whatever they get, and also slip transfer fees. That's big ticket stuff, and people come in and they'll use credit cards for that too, to rack up those frequent flyer miles or whatever.
Right, right. Good. And so do we have a system now that takes the chip card, or is this just, we're still doing the swipe and? Do
Well,
we?
this will have the chip, but right now I believe we're swiping.
Yeah, okay,
But we're trying to upgrade all of this stuff all at once.
right. Good, good. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Great, thank you. Moving along to business services. Brian?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Every now and then, we're happy to provide the Commission, as well as our many viewers at home, a little insight into different segments of our operation down at the waterfront. And so this month, we took a little look at our parking operations division. Now, parking operations in the waterfront take place 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Our main harbor kiosk is open every minute of every day of every week throughout the entire year. Our parking division is also charged with managing over 2,500 parking spaces spread over 7 parking lots, as well as Stearns Wharf. And they do this under the guidance of, it's actually 3 full-time employees and between 35 and 50 hourly employees, depending on the time of the season. Obviously, right now, as we're ramping up into the summertime, we maximize the amount of hourly folks we have working for us. And parking operations isn't just the kiosk, somebody sitting in a kiosk. There's much more to it. It includes parking permit sales, the parking monitors, customer service, technical maintenance and upkeep of our ski data, as well as our Luke programs throughout the various parking lots, as well as our daily accounting and auditing to make sure everything's being accounted for, as well as special events. And with the growing popularity of the waterfront, we've seen significant impact on our parking operations over the years. More and more festivals of all different sizes and shapes want to have their festival down at the waterfront. So much so that the parking division handles over 200 special events a year. Wow. So that's a considerable amount of events, and it's not always spread out. For instance, a few Saturdays ago, Saturday, May 6th, they had 5 different events on one day. And they included the Boston Whaler Club Fishing Tournament, the Operation Clean Sweep, the Birthing Center 5K Run, a private wedding, and the Santa Barbara Sailing Club's Cinco de Mayo Regatta. So these kind of things can take place all at once. They're also very involved in the cruise ship program and setting that up early in the morning. And so accommodating so many different events with different needs, whether they need 10 parking spaces reserved or 100 parking spaces reserved, takes a tremendous amount of planning and flexibility and teamwork. And Cesar Barrios is our parking supervisor, and James Hatzidakis is our parking coordinator, and Sergio Arriaga is our assistant parking coordinator. And they do just that. They do a wonderful job. They've got wonderful customer service skills, and they try and parlay that or push that off onto our hourly employees as well. They hold quarterly meetings, and we really stress the customer service end of thing, knowing that it's the first line of discussion when people come into the harbor, and it's the last people you see when you leave. So we're really trying to make an impact on these folks so they do want to come back. We don't want parking to be something that they get frustrated over and don't come back. So they work really hard at that, and it's a great group of folks who work tirelessly, and we're happy to have them as part of our team.
Great. Questions, comments? How would someone go about getting a permit if they needed, like, parking for a wedding or a special event?
Commissioners, the first thing to do would either be to call our parking office. We're always happy to help. We've put some of our forms online. But generally, it's always best to come down, give us a little visit, talk about exactly what you want. We can decide where the best place to have your parking set aside is. We can't just reserve all the spaces everywhere. So we like to help everybody out and make it the best plan for whatever they have going. These are very important events to them, whether it's a small family barbecue or a wedding. We don't want them to have to think about parking. They've got bigger issues to deal with. So coming down to the office or giving us a call is always the first.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Mr. Chair, if I might add, it takes a lot of coordination between our parking division and the Parks and Recreation Department, because they organize all the weddings and do the permitting for the triathlon, the
Right.
running races and all sorts of, and then they come to us for the parking. So
Okay.
we work hand in hand with that. And then our parking office will make laminated permits that they can put on their dashboard for that day, or cordon off a certain section for, depending on the type of event, and sometimes reserve a whole lot for real big events.
Right.
But it takes careful coordination between Parks and Recreation and Waterfront so that multiple events don't get scheduled for the same place.
Stacked up on top
Yeah.
of each other, yeah, great. All right, any other comments or questions? Thank you, Brian. All right, facilities, Carl?
Good evening, Chair Sloan and Commissioners. This evening, I'm going to report on 2 construction projects out on Stearns Wharf that we're looking forward to completing by the end of the fiscal year. The first is our annual pile driving project. Staff recently completed dive inspections of all the pylons on the wharf and some other structural members. And they found that we need to replace 12 wooden piles, install 4 splice piles, install pile caps, stringers, and deck boards, and reconstruct a lift station platform, something that's kind of unique. It's a very light amount of work compared to normal, especially considering how rough the winter was. 4 of the wooden piles to be replaced were damaged or actually destroyed during the large swells that we had. So this is normally we have 20 to 30 piles or more, so this is a surprisingly light amount of work. Splice piles are used under buildings where we can't replace piles and drive piles, or you've heard me report on wrapping damaged piles with a fiberglass jacket and filling them with the grout and epoxy. It's the least preferred method, but it's sort of better than nothing. They're somewhat difficult to do because of access, and this is typically how they're shaped. There's 3 pieces. This lower piece is jetted in, 5, 10, 15 feet, whatever embedment they can get. There's another piece in the middle, and then another collar that goes up to the actual caps themselves. We've had these analyzed by our engineering firm, and found that they're adequate to support the loads, especially under the buildings. The loads are kind of lighter under the buildings than they are on the roadway. This is a lift station. We have 3 sewer lift stations out on Stearns Wharf, one out at Moby Dick's, one under the city's offices, and then another under the Harbor Restaurant. They take a beating. Whenever there's large waves, they get hit with waves. It's kind of an older technology, but it's very reliable and works rather well. We've had quite a bit of luck with it. This particular platform is under the city offices, and the platform itself is damaged and it needs not to be replaced entirely, but needs to be heavily maintained, and that's something that's just a little beyond what our staff is capable of doing. But it's important to maintain these utilities so that the lift station itself doesn't fall into the sea and does the job it's supposed to do. So it's kind of a unique job for us this year. Surprisingly, we only received a single bid this year, which is normally not the case. We have several local contractors and sometimes somebody out of town. But the bidding climate's not as good as it was several years ago. Contractors are busy, and we received a bid of $186,000, which is probably $35,000 more than we were expecting. It's quite high. Schott Construction was the low bid contractor. It's a reliable contractor and worked out there quite a bit. But we'll have to work on that a little bit because the price is kind of high, and there may be some items that are in the bid that we may take out and do by staff, such as deck boards, and my staff can also do splice piles, and those were some of the items that were sort of marked up. Every year in our capital improvement program, we have $400,000 appropriated for this work. Next year it's going to go up to $425,000 because we spend just about every penny, believe it or not. We procure all the materials, all the heavy timbers. We keep an inventory that's adequate to replace about 3 to 5 bents along the roadway for emergency work. Worst case scenario, a boat goes through or the surf just destroys that section of the wharf. We have enough inventory and heavy timber on board to replace those as quickly as possible with the goal of reopening the wharf. So that's worked quite well over the years, and we're going to continue with that program. And this project should start up in just a couple of weeks. The other project is something we've been working on with our city's Public Works Department, and is the final project that's associated with the Cabrillo Boulevard Bridge Replacement Project, and that's the replacing the wharf. It's the crosswalk at the foot of the wharf. We've reported to the commission before. We have a pedestrian counter out there now. We have over 1 million people. We're taking access to the wharf in 2016, and over 250,000 vehicles. That's a tremendous amount of people, and it's a high traffic area. And this recent construction provides an opportunity to replace this crosswalk at the foot of the wharf. The crosswalk in and of itself isn't so bad, but the approaches, the concrete sidewalk approaches have a lot of trip hazards. They take a lot of maintenance, and they just don't look good, especially considering everything else around here has been replaced and upgraded. So we asked Public Works to include it as at the tail end of this bridge replacement project, which they agreed to do, which is quite generous of them. The plan they ginned up actually reaches out into the sidewalks in each direction quite a way, so they'll remove all those damaged sections, and it'll butt up right against the wood, and it's all going to be concrete. Some of it's asphalt now, and it's just going to look considerably better. As I mentioned, this was designed by Public Works. They received a low bid of $58,000 for the work, and this is going to be a cost share project. Most of it's paid for out of the street fund, which is really strapped. They really don't have any contingency funds whatsoever. So we're going to participate to the tune of about $28,000 just to make this project happen. We want to take advantage of the opportunity, and it would be construction should be done by June 22nd. And it's the final project. This will end 2 years of construction at the foot of the wharf. So we're looking forward to the whole area looking better, being more functional, and not impeding any more vehicular or pedestrian traffic out there. That concludes my report this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carl, and I do echo your sentiment that we'll all be excited to see that construction completed. Any impact for the piles for anybody on the wharf?
Chair Sloan, Commissioner Spicer, thanks for mentioning that. All the work that's done in the roadway is done at night, so the wharf remains open. There's a little bit of impact during the day when we drive piles. It's a little bit loud. We avoid the lunch hours. And a lot of the work is done under the wharf, and people will never know that's going on. Yeah, so we try to minimize impacts to the general public out there.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the great presentation, Carl. What, though, exactly is a bent? How much of the wharf does that represent?
Chair Sloan, Commissioner McCray, a bent is a row of piles. So there's 158 rows of piles all the way out, including the seaward and shoreward fingers. And that's how we identify the location of where piles are. They're on a given bent 50 is about halfway out the roadway, and then we measure in a distance from the east edge or the west edge. And that's how we identify individual piles and where they're located. You're welcome.
I just had a comment along those lines. Maybe next year when we talk about this, could you bring some diagrams of what all these things mean, pile caps and bents and all that stuff, just so that...
Chair Sloan, I'd be happy to.
We've had great pictures in the past.
I know, but it's been a while, and so, in the report it talks about 30 feet of pile cap. Well, to me, that just doesn't seem much of anything, but maybe that's a lot,
No, it's really, you're right, it isn't very much. That's why I wanted to emphasize we didn't find a lot of damage this year. It's normally several hundred feet of pile cap. There's 2,000 piles under the wharf, just to
Right.
put it in context, and
Yeah.
there's probably well over a mile of pile cap and several miles of stringers, so there's a lot of material out there.
Yeah.
But this is a particularly small one. But I'd be happy to bring a diagram and just point out these different features. It's something that's,
Right.
I speak this
Education.
language every day, so I'm
Right,
not used
right,
to
right,
it, so
right,
I
right,
apologize
right.
for that.
Well, and I think it's a testament to the maintenance that you've done that we're not doing more maintenance in this heavy weather year. I mean, some of the stuff that you and your team have done have really, started to show. Otherwise we may have more damage under there if we weren't maintaining it the way we did. So good job. Thank you.
Mr.
you.
Chair, if I might clarify, being a layman on these things, it took me a few years to understand all this. The piles, obviously, you know what they are. They
Right.
drive them into the sand, and you may have 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever in a row.
Right.
And the pile cap is what, 24 by 24 inch? 18? Oh, okay,
So a
wow.
foot square.
And that's the pile cap. And so
Right.
it goes along that line of piles, and that's what a bent is.
Right.
Above the pile cap are the stringers
Mm-hmm.
that go parallel with the roadway, and then on top of the stringers are the deck boards that you see on the top of the
Right.
wharf. So you've
Okay.
got the piles,
Pile cap.
they go to the pile cap,
Stringers. deck board.
deck boards.
Huh, okay.
That's
Good,
the simple explanation.
good. How it's built
But
up.
we'll bring you a full diagram
Yeah,
next,
no.
next year.
Yeah, next year. Great. Okay, anything else? Okay, harbor operations.
Good evening,
Take it
Mr.
away,
Chair.
Mick.
I apologize.
Take it away.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Unfortunately, I start tonight on a very sad note, a tragic one, in fact. On Saturday, April 29th, in the afternoon, about 4:30, Harbor Patrol responded to a report of an individual who had fallen off his paddleboard, an adult male, and hadn't been seen for several minutes. And when we got on scene, Officer Jan Martinez worked to determine exactly where the man fell off, got the boat anchored, and began assessing available resources to find the individual and hopefully save him. Meanwhile, Officer Rick Hubbard donned a wetsuit and dove down to a depth exceeding 30 feet looking for the victim, but unfortunately wasn't able to find him. So ultimately, and it was included, we also had Santa Barbara's City Fire's water rescue team did the same, looking for the individual on the seafloor and couldn't find him. But meanwhile, the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's dive team happened to be in the area close at hand and had just finished a day of training, and we called them in, and they dove with scuba gear on the site and found the individual who was in fact deceased. The coroner and and his crew met the patrol boat at the launch ramp parking lot. And so there's really not a lot more to say about that other than the fact that it's a sad and tragic event, and we at Waterfront, who spend all our time and days around the water and around boating, share with our community in grieving for the loss of this young man who was an outstanding scholar athlete at Westmont, a 30-year-old individual. So tragic note on that front, but I'm hopeful that there can be lessons learned out of this for all paddlers, in fact, all ocean enthusiasts. In fact, on our website, we have not only paddling tips, if folks want to look on the Waterfront Department website, we also have added a video, thanks to Dominique Samario and her good work working with Captain Steve McCullough, got a video of paddling tips up there, and we would highly encourage folks before they go paddling and enjoying the harbor area on paddleboards or kayaks to visit our website and look at that. And finally, over the Memorial Day weekend, for 4 days, I believe it is, we're going to be posting safety tips about paddling. They'll be on the marina gates. They'll be on A-frames, sandwich boards down at the launch ramp. So we're doing everything we can to push the information out and the education out. And so we'll stay attuned to that, and just all we can do is try to educate people the very best we can. Moving on to a more pleasant note, you may have noticed we've been down at the harbor the last couple days. The replica of the San Salvador arrived yesterday in the harbor. The San Salvador is a 92-foot vessel. It's a replica of the vessel that Cortez arrived on in California in 1542. and was credited as being one of the first European crew to explore the West Coast. And it's there are dockside tours every day. Folks can go to the Maritime Museum, website and see the schedule for the dockside tours. It's really quite a ship. It's something to behold, and the replica will remain at the dock until next Tuesday, until it takes off back for San Diego. And I think you can actually book a passage on that sail all the way to San Diego if there's still any spaces left. So contact the Maritime Museum if you want to tour this boat at the dock or possibly take a sail to San Diego border. And finally, a recap of Operation Clean Sweep. We promoted it a lot, and it turned out to be the success we hoped it would. We had over, like 50 volunteers and dock workers. 15 or 16 of them were volunteer divers. And this year they removed 1.5 tons of debris from the Marina 3 area. This brought our 11-year total to 19.2 tons of debris, and we're just going to keep working around the harbor. This is our second circumnavigation of the harbor. We'll be in Marina 2 next year. And what did we find? Well, we found fishing poles, a galley sink, bicycles, steering wheel, tires, crab receivers, dock carts, dock steps, outboard motors, a fiberglass skip, an inflatable boat, and a microwave oven. And I've sort of mentally over the years compartmentalized this into 3 groups. I think, looking at the trend line, I think we've got stuff that you can argue blew off the dock in a strong wind, light deck chairs, things like that. Maybe even a barbecue, even though they shouldn't be barbecuing on the dock. It's against the law, but we'll give them that. And then there are those things that, things that got down flooded possibly, like especially in these heavy rains this last winter. Then there's the ugly category, and that's stuff people pitched over the side. I tried to fit the microwave oven into one of the first 2 categories, but it didn't fit. So as a reminder, a friendly reminder, after 11 years of doing this and 19.2 tons later, the ocean's not a garbage pail. And we would really appreciate I would love to see this number go down. And so if folks didn't throw stuff in the bay, that would be a really important step forward culturally for everybody. So what do we find? Let's take a look. We didn't find the San Salvador. So here's one of our volunteers wheeling one of the first loads up the dock, which is much cleaner than it was at the end of the event. And these are some of our volunteers from Santa Barbara Channel Keeper, terrific partners in these kind of environmental efforts. And here are 2 of our maintenance staff members. They did a great job unloading stuff. It's not, you can't just toss it in there. You have to pack it to the back of the dumpster. So there's actually a lot of work that goes on with this. And here, and allow me to take the opportunity now to thank Commissioner Sloan and Kramer for attending and helping out. This is Commissioner Sloan. He and I recognize these people, but they're all, there's that guy in the back, too. I had a weird pirate scarf on that day, a bad hair day, but I won't do it again. I've taken a lot of grief. So they're pulling on a catamaran skiff. You can't see him now, but down on the seafloor was Charlie Lara. You'll see him later. This was a catamaran skiff that was buried in the mud, and with all the human power trying to lift it off, we couldn't, and Charlie Lara, certainly one of the heroes of that day, went back to his boat, got 2 float bags. They eventually got it up with the human power and the float bags, and you'll see later what a joyous moment it was carrying it off. These are some of our dive friends from the Salty Dog Dive Company. And what you notice here, what's really cool about this is everybody's smiling. Commissioner Sloan and I were talking about this the other day. It's really a feel-good event. It's the kind of feeling you have when you're doing a litter removal from a park. It just feels good to get rid of this stuff. And the divers actually thanked us too. They said, "Thanks for keeping us safe." And I had never really put it in that kind of a perspective. And when they're down there, scrubbing a boat hole, the last thing they want to do is lacerate themselves on some piece of junk on the seafloor. Here's another one of our Sterling volunteers. This stuff is a lot of trips up and down the dock and a lot of mud and grease and grime. So I really extend our thanks to all of them. Here again are some of our friends from, help me here, Ken Pally. Thank you, from Santa Barbara County Surf Rider. That's Ken Pally on the right, and that's Dean on the left, Pleister. And so they're every year. They've been coming since the beginning of this stuff, this program, and they take it very seriously. And again, the smiles around. This was a galley sink. I doubt it blew over the side. But another one of the ones that falls into that category. Big smiles as always. And here's a group shot of several of our helpers. I think these folks may have been from NOAA, but they were terrific volunteers, all of them. They took a lot of pride in their work. I still don't know what this was, but I have some guesses. I'd be speculating. It could be a storage pickle barrel that some fishermen use as a receiver, but it was so plugged with growth and crap that it was difficult to exactly identify. And here's another shot, circling back. Commissioner Sloan still pull on it, and there's Charlie Lara with his float bags. And here it comes. It's coming up over the side now. Everybody's leaning in, as they say. And again, the divers jumped in for another shot. And there it is. There's the skiff with the proud crew that pulled her up. There's Commissioner Kramer and Commissioner Sloan, all smiles. This was the catch of the day. And there they are, loading it up into the dumpster, and that's what the full dumpster, 1.5 tons of stuff, looked like at the end. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have no questions, Mick, just to say it was a fun day, but maybe it would be good to have a graph next year to show each year how many tons or parts of tons have come up. And I think last year there was something like close to 2 tons. I'm not sure, but maybe it's decreasing. Hopefully,
that I hope so. That's a great suggestion. I'd be happy to provide that next time we review this.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'd just like to echo some of the things that you pointed out there, Mick, is that there were a lot of groups that showed up. We had a sorority from UCSB, and we had the NOAA people, and we had a lot of community organizations really came down and helped out. And it was a very fun morning. It was a good cause and a great time. So, yeah, go ahead.
And the sandwiches were tremendous, and it was a really good idea to have half sandwiches.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we realized whole sandwiches were more than anybody could eat, so we made halves this year. I credit Jeanette with doing all the administrative work organizing that, but thank you.
Great. Anything else? Go ahead, Merritt.
Was there a name on that little skiff? Lost one just like it in about 85. It just disappeared off the dock and never came back.
Didn't see a name on it, Commissioner McRae.
It was the egg roll.
Great. All right. Moving ahead to new business. Jeanette, would you like to read the recommendation?
Yes, item 6, presentation by Channel Islands Marine and Wildlife Institute. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a presentation from Channel Islands Marine and Wildlife Institute regarding the current domoic acid situation affecting local wildlife.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Channel Islands Marine and Wildlife Institute, or CIMWE is the acronym, is the only authorized organization to respond to rehabilitate pinnipeds, such as seals and sea lions and so forth, in the Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. CIMWE's facility is located in Santa Barbara County at the historic Vista Del Mar School campus on 2.8 acres off Highway 101, just south of the Gaviota Pass. Jeanette and I got a chance to tour the facility on a very rainy day in February or March, one of the 2 or 3 really rainy days we had, and it was a real treat to see the facility and the lab and the equipment that they have. So CIMWE would like to present to the Commission tonight about the current domoic acid issues that are going on, and this seems to be a recurring thing now. Year after year we get these, and we have sometimes bird fatalities and marine mammals affected by it and so forth. So Ruth and Sam Dover are here tonight to present about domoic acid.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission. My name is Dr. Sam Dover. I'm a veterinarian. I've been practicing marine mammals medicine for 28 years. My career began at SeaWorld in San Diego. And after 10 years with them, I moved to Santa Barbara, started working at the Santa Barbara Zoo with the intent of starting our nonprofit. So this has been kind of my lifelong dream. And fortunately, my wife pretty much runs the thing. But I show up every now and then. We have about 100 volunteers. We serve, like I said, we do both Ventura and Santa Barbara County. We've had Ventura since 2006, and since December of 2015, we've had the pleasure of serving in Santa Barbara County as well. Right. So essentially, we're going to go over a little bit, depending on how much time I have, I'll go over a little bit of what we've been seeing over the years and currently what we're seeing right now.
Great.
Of course, you can see this is our mission statement. It's a very big mission statement, but we have been achieving all these goals. Specifically, one of the things that we really emphasize, of course, is education, because that is really critical to what we're doing locally. Without the education, this continues to be an ongoing problem. So I'd say, if not more than half of our job is to educate the public and the school children, of course, about what's going on. So we are authorized, as Scott said, by National Marine Fisheries Service, which is a division of NOAA. And we have a permit called a stranding agreement that allows us to serve both Santa Barbara and Ventura County. It's about 153 miles of coastline. And on average, we run between 80 to 100 volunteers. We're an all-volunteer organization with the exception of one seasonally paid employee. And that pay, her salary comes out of a grant we get occasionally. It's a competitive grant from National Marine Fisheries Service called the Prescott Grant. So what is domoic acid? Well, it's a neurotoxin, and it's specifically related to algae blooms, specifically the algae called Pseudonychia australis. You don't need to worry about that. But it's also called red tide, and we've all heard of that. Just because we have the red tide doesn't necessarily mean there's the toxin. However, this year, we've been seeing incredible numbers of it. Probably this has been occurring since the beginning of time, but no one really knows. We weren't really aware of this toxin affecting marine mammals probably until the mid-90s. And curiously enough, it was a bird researcher who turned us on and said, hey, look into this. And of course, if you're familiar with the movie Birds from Alfred Hitchcock, that was based on a similar event back in the 60s. It occurs typically in the warmer times of the year when the water warms up, and also when we get runoff. Like this year, we had a lot of rain. Of course, we had 6 years of drought and then a large rain. I'm suspicious, and not just me. There's a group at USC, the University of Southern California, that studies specifically harmful algae blooms. So there's a lot of research behind this. And in fact, they are constantly monitoring the levels in the ocean. Also, the California Department of Public Health monitors the levels of domoic acid and the toxins in the fish supply and the shellfish. So how do they get it? How do our marine mammals get it? Well, they eat fish that are filter feeders, specifically anchovies and sardines. And these toxins build up in these animals, or the fish, that is, without causing problems to the fish. When the animals ingest it, the marine mammals ingest it, the load that's in the fish then builds up in the animals' bodies. It specifically affects the brain, an area called the hippocampus. And so it's the essential part of the brain which causes the mental memory of the map. That is, it's a spatial memory. So these animals are relying on going back and forth to the resources, that is the islands or the fisheries, and when they get infected by this, it damages that memory. Sometimes it's mild, sometimes it's severe. And of course, we see it most commonly in California sea lions, specifically pregnant females, because they spend a lot more time along the coast. And again, the amount of damage is variable based on the dose. We don't know the dose because we're not out there feeding these animals the toxin. We have no idea. In humans, it's called paralytic shellfish poisoning. So recently, just this year, as you can see on the bottom there, Santa Barbara County, the California Department of Public Health, shut down or made an extreme recommendation to not do sport harvesting of bivalves and shellfish because of that. And you can see in April 28th, Ventura County did the same. And they will lift that as they continue to test the organisms that are susceptible to it. So what do we see in Demoic acid? I have a short video here. And this is typical. A very healthy, fat sea lion, female, laying in the shore, having a seizure. This is basically a grand mal seizure. So we can have petite mals or grand mals, and they're at the shoreline. They're very disoriented, and this is kind of the beginnings of what you see. Sometimes it's a very mild, just a little head tremor, head movement, irregular movements, foaming at the mouth, vomiting. Same thing occurs in people, same exact thing. And so you can see the animal is alert enough to stay out of the water, that is to breathe, but it's clearly severely affected. And of course, it can go down from all these different levels, eventually leading to coma and or death. So what do? Well, these are our practices. Because it's a permanent damage to the brain from this toxin, there's really nothing we can do to reverse it. I can treat the seizures. I can use various medications to treat the seizures, but the damage has been done. So what we do, our policy is to put them on a 72-hour watch, 3 days. Because if it's a small dose, they can excrete that toxin, and just like in people, a little bit of brain damage is not terrible. A lot of brain damage is. So it really just depends. So in my opinion, and in fact National Marine Fisheries agrees with this opinion now, we essentially leave these animals for 72 hours to see if they can recover on their own. If I pick them up and take them out to our facility, I'm adding a level of stress that can cause a seizure or make the disease, which could be recoverable, much worse. Plus these animals that are healthy and fat, they don't want to be around people. They do not want to be around us. So it's not really good for them to bring them into our environments. A lot of different facilities do over the years, but now, because of the numbers and now we understand what's going on, National Marine Fisheries is encouraging all the facilities up and down the coast to just leave them be and kind of follow what we're doing. Over the years, we've always seen Demoic acid in small numbers, a couple here, a couple there. This year, it's essentially the worst year we've ever seen. Mm-hmm. So we also put up signs. You can see there's little wooden stakes and there's an animal at the end. See if I get a pointer here. Yeah, there's an animal right here. And, well, it's not showing me though. But you can see behind that sign there's a sea lion. So we'll stake them off. We'll have people there and monitor the traffic, monitor the public, and essentially educate them to what we're doing, what we're seeing, and why we do what we do. So, on April 14th of this year, the beginning of Easter weekend, we started getting an average of over 100 calls. On that first day, 111 calls per day. Our average calls during a normal busy season is probably 30 to 50 per day. So that began on April 14th. The floodgates literally opened. And those aren't 111 different animals. It's typically this multiple calls per animal. So for 10 days, as you can see, we had over 60 to 120 calls per day. Currently, the calls are down a little, 20 to 80, but we're continuing to respond. Since that April 14th date, 1,604 animals, or 4 calls, 1,600 calls just since that time. So as you can see, our workload has definitely increased. And when we parsed it all out, 193 animals that we suspect had Demoic acid. We also, one of the signs of this is also caused premature deliveries. And these animals typically are deliver pups, healthy pups, in June. National Marine Fisheries likes to say the birth date of all sea lions, California sea lions, is June 15th. But of course, it's,
Right.
2 or 3 weeks before, 2 or 3 weeks after. We'll have some in May normally. We'll have some also in July. So this year we've seen 11 premature births. And of course, I'm sure there's many more we haven't seen. And of course, it also affects dolphins, mostly common dolphins. And so far we've had 12 just in this 1 month period, which is significantly higher than normal for us. So what do? This is part of our educational program. Definitely do not do the following: touch, feed, harass, cover, pour water. These are things that happen every day by a well-intended public. Unfortunately, the animals don't respond well to this. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a woman who claimed to be a local lawyer, attorney, who attempted on Ledbetter Beach to drag an animal by its flippers back into the water. And her face was within this close to that animal's mouth. She is lucky she did not get her face bitten off. Mm-hmm. There was a reporter there, she works for a magazine, who knew the law, knew the right thing to do. She recorded the whole event. It's actually very disturbing to watch. And the local public essentially began to mob her and tell her to leave the animal alone. And we hope some of that's because of our efforts. These animals can look calm and quiet and asleep. We've had people put their children on them to take pictures. We've had people laying next to them taking selfies. And that animal can snap out of it and suddenly do some serious damage to the people. And of course, do not try to remove them from the water line. That's what that woman was doing, and she thought she was doing the right thing. The person that did record that reported that to National Marine Fisheries NOAA Enforcement, which is the enforcement arm of National Marine Fisheries who controls or enforces the laws of the Marine Mammal Protection Act.
Right.
And of course, what we want people to do is call us. We'll go down there, we'll send some people down, we'll stake them off, we'll put our 72-hour watch on. It's not always 72 hours. Sometimes they expire before that. And sometimes in certain cases, if it's in a hazardous situation, I may euthanize the animal or we may relocate it to a different beach. So thank you for your time and attention. Any questions?
Questions? Do you get out to the islands?
Yes, many times.
Okay, so see there. When you quarantine them or watch them for the 72 hours, do you feed them?
No, we do not. These animals will not. First of all, we're feeding them dead fish,
Right.
frozen fish, food quality frozen fish for our facility, for example.
Right.
Right now, currently, we have 20 sea lion pups up at our facility. Those animals adapt readily to eating from us. Adults do not. It can occur, and we can make it happen. But in this case, these animals are essentially in a neurological state. Food is not an issue.
Right.
They can fast for weeks.
Right.
And so food's not an issue right now. It's just essentially watching the level of disease or the progression of the problem and deciding, well, hopefully, in many cases, if it's a mild case, unlike the one I showed in the video, we'll just take them off, and by the next day, they're gone.
Do you ever see the same animal come back
Many times.
with a progressively degrading condition?
Many times.
Because they go back out and eat more
Yes.
contaminated?
And in fact, there was an animal rehabilitated facility in Los Angeles who has a different philosophy than us. And they had it for about 2 weeks, threw it back, we got it.
Yeah.
So we do see a lot of return customers, yeah.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. When you have to euthanize an animal, do you take it to your facility? Do you take care of it there? What's the process?
It depends on the situation. Of course, I'm a licensed veterinarian. I'm allowed to use these things. And of course, National Marine Fisheries has allowed me the privilege of making the decision. So it's up to the veterinarian on site. Sometimes I will just go ahead and do it on the beach if there's not a big crowd, or if it's the situation I don't have enough people. These animals can be 200, 300 pounds. And so it's not simple enough, and I don't have large enough containers to put them in. So many times my number one goal is not to euthanize them on the beach. But sometimes it does occur. Frequently, I will also pull them off and euthanize them in the truck on my way leaving the beach.
And that's where I was going. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Go ahead.
Thanks for your report. This seems early in the season for domoic acid to this extent. What do you expect for the rest of the summer, and how are things looking?
I wish I had a good answer for that, because I don't. Again, this is probably the worst it's been seen since we've started recognizing domoic acid, so over 20 years. And everybody up and down the coast is saying the same thing. Most years, I'll see a spurt, maybe 3 to 5 animals, and then it kind of goes away. Today, we only had 6 animals under watch between both Ventura and Santa Barbara. So the numbers are going down right now, but that doesn't mean it can't spike again in a few weeks.
Well, about 10 years ago, I think there was a huge outbreak of it with pelicans and other seabirds. And I understand that there's not so many this year, but there were some in Oxnard and a few in this area. Are you seeing that also?
Well, we don't do the birds.
Right, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's the
Right.
Wildlife Care Network. And they have, of course, seen increased numbers as well. And, of course, beachgoers are reporting a lot of dead birds on the beaches.
I know the marine mammals seem to be more seriously affected than last year, at least. And
Yeah,
as well
for sure.
this year.
Definitely this year's, like I said, the worst we've
Yeah.
ever seen. And we've been on operation since 2006.
Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
It's tremendous.
Thank you. I have a question about your facility. Do you pipe water in there?
Okay, so this is the facilities, the old Vista Del Mar School in Gaviota. We actually do not pipe water in there. We get our water from our neighbor, which used to be Arguello Gas and Oil, used to be PXP. And then before the oil spill, what they do is they have a pipeline that goes about a half mile out in the ocean, and they make their own fresh water via reverse osmosis. we had an unlimited water supply because they have a 700,000 gallon water tank that they have to have for fire control purposes. So they like to what they call exercise the water.
Right.
So we were able to use as much water as we wanted. Since the oil spill, which was exactly 2 years ago, actually tomorrow will be 2 years ago, they lost the ability. They were using the excess natural gas from the oil to operate the reverse osmosis unit. Now they have to pay electricity. So that staff has gone from maybe 6 or 8 people down to 2. Nothing's been happening up there. So, but they have to maintain some water. We're still getting it from them.
Okay.
We do have an opportunity for well. There's wells up there. In fact, we've spoken with one of the neighbors. There's a potential to use his water in the case that we can no longer get it from them. But that's one of our major concerns, and we're addressing it as we speak.
I was referring to seawater, though.
Actually, these animals do not need seawater.
Okay.
Dolphins definitely do.
Right.
Pinnipeds do not. In the long term, absolutely. But they're usually in our care for maybe 2 to 3 months at the most.
Okay.
They don't even like to swim. They swim because that's where they get their food.
Right,
and they swim because that's where they get away from predators.
Right.
But a sea lion pup, we put them on it's called a pig blanket. It's a warm heat
Right.
pad. They are perfectly happy to lay on that thing all day long. We'll put water in there with them, small tubs,
Right.
and occasionally, and then actually we put warm water in there, and then they'll hop in the water. Right. But no, they don't really need water. The one thing I do have to do, however, is supplement them with salt. So I give them salt tablets.
Yeah.
They have a requirement for that metabolically.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the
You're welcome.
report. That's great.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. All right. Jeanette, you want to read the next recommendation, please?
Item 7, special event camping permit, Wine and Roses Regatta. Recommendation that Harbor Commission A, review and consider a request for a special permit to allow event participant camping in the Harbor West parking lot from 8 a.m. Friday, August 18th until 5 p.m. Sunday, August 20th during the 2017 Wine and Roses Regatta. And B, approve Wine and Roses event chairman Dre Murray's request for participant camping for the upcoming event as allowed per Santa Barbara Municipal Code Section 15.16.090.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. The Wine and Roses Regatta is a California State Catamaran Championship race, and it's annually held at Ledbetter Beach. The event is hosted by the Southern California Hobie Cat Fleets, as well as our own Santa Barbara Yacht Club. Now, this is a request that's been coming for quite some time now. And again, as Jeanette stated, it's a special camping permit so that participants may legally safeguard the equipment. They bring in some expensive equipment. It sits either on the sand, generally on the sand, and they like to be close to that just to make sure it makes it through the evening. Now, the Santa Barbara Municipal Code prohibits camping in public spaces. However, there is a section in there that Jeanette mentioned that allows the commission, it gives the commission the discretion to post and designate an area for camping within the waterfront's jurisdiction. And this year, as with many of the other years, the Wine and Roses Regatta has requested approximately 100 spaces in our harbor, the eastern portion of our Harbor West parking lot. And they are charged the regular rate of $12 per space per day. Here is a map of the area. So this is Loma Alta, and then here's our Harbor West lot, and here is the eastern side. So it makes for a nice, you divide it right in half, and you get vehicle circulation, public vehicle circulation down here. So that is the request before your commission this evening for fiscal year 2017, or calendar year 2017, I should say. Sorry, I'm still in budget mode. Moving forward, though, we would like to make some changes as far as this particular event is concerned. As I mentioned in my earlier report tonight, the popularity of the waterfront has increased tremendously over the years. It's a very popular place to come down, and our parking lots routinely fill to capacity on the weekends from April through September, and quite often, as most of us here know, October's an amazing month in Santa Barbara, and they fill up on those weekends too. So what happens when we set aside half of our Harbor West parking lot in August is that it eliminates public vehicle access to the lot. You only get half the access. We cordon off the area so a vehicle can't go straight through, and that's a safety issue. You've got people moving in and back and forth off the beach. So it eliminates that public vehicle access, and it severely restricts pedestrian and bicycle use a lot of times. They are allowed to go through, but I think people see the blockade set up and they go somewhere else. So the biggest issue is it denies the public the use of important parking spaces in the busiest month of the summer season. So moving forward, we'd like to continue to support the event. It's been going on for quite some time. However, based on the the public usage of our parking lots, it needs to take place outside of the waterfront's busy season. And in particular, it needs to take place outside of the space between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So basically from Memorial Day to Labor Day, we don't want to set aside parking spots for 3 days. Again, this is an August weekend, a few weeks after Fiesta. It's very, very busy down there. So what we'd like to do moving forward, and we're working with the Wine and Roses folks to do this, is not have the event between Memorial Day and Labor Day starting next year. It's a little late this year, so we'd like them to continue and have the event this year, and then moving forward, reschedule that and work with them to make that happen. So that is my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have this evening.
Thanks for your report. Have there been complaints about the parking and the access?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kramer, yes, there have been complaints over the years. I think the biggest issue we have is that in the past, a number of years ago, the rental time frame was from 5 p.m. on Friday to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Well, what happens is you've got people coming from all over the state. There's really not a lot of places to park their RV. We do have a couple of oversized vehicle spaces, but these people tend to come in and occupy the lot well in advance of their scheduled time. So they're taking up those spaces. There have been arguments. Our parking staff has been verbally accosted on a number of occasions, routinely. And we understand that's not the folks who put the event on. They're really trying to help. Mm-hmm. It's just they can't control everything. So by having them rent the whole day Friday, that helps to alleviate that one issue. They generally leave the area clean, and they're good to work with, but it does create some consternation from the public who want to come down to the beach and use it, and half of it is filled with half of our parking lot is filled with campers and things like that.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kramer, again, just echoing what Brian said, we haven't received complaints from the public, but it's been brought to our attention over the last few years that our parking staff is having a difficult time with it. And they will tell you that it's the most difficult event that they handle all year long, including 4th of July and Harbor Festival. This is tougher for them to keep under control and manage and, keep things moving. So we're trying to clean that up.
Okay, I'm surprised. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
How many similar requests do you get throughout the year for a big block of parking, 100 spaces like that, prime time? And how do you handle them?
Chair Sloan, Commissioner McCray, we don't get too many at the 100 space level. I'd say the biggest event we have that blocks off a huge chunk of parking spaces is the Santa Barbara Triathlon. That's a whole lot easier to contain because that has one entry and exit point, and there it's blocked. And they take up the entire space. And they've been doing that for 20, 30 years, so they really do have that down to a science. And we turn that over to them, and they do a great job. So as far as 100 spaces, we may get some of our running events down at Ledbetter Beach to block off that many spaces. But again, that's an early Saturday morning, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, the Santa Barbara Marathon that rents out a good deal of spaces. People are showing up at 5:30 in the morning, and they're out of there by 11. So this is a 3-day event occupying 100 spaces. So by far, this is outside of the triathlon, the most intense use of parking spaces, rented out parking spaces.
It does, to me, it seems like a big request of the harbor and waterfront to do this for them. And it sounds like it's something that's gone on in earlier times when it was easier to do. Have they considered just having a smaller group of campers there that can watch the gear?
Commissioner or Chair Sloan, Commissioner McCray, great question. They try to get as many people as they can down here, just like any other event, to make it budgetarily acceptable. They don't want to go in the hole. And this does take some money on their end of things. And so they want to come out at least even, if not more, and they like to donate funds to local charities here and there. So, as with many events, they don't necessarily have a cap, but they've never really come close to a cap. I think the biggest thing is that it's really changed over the years. It started out a number of years ago as they were tent camping, and the idea being that they needed to keep their gear safe. Over time, it's morphed into, I don't think there were any tent campers last year. It's large RVs, which, hey, it makes it a whole lot more comfortable. These RVs take up 2 spaces, they pop out, and with all their gear, they're taking up 4 spaces, and they do pay for that. But it's just really changed the dynamic considerably over time. And we've looked at options of moving them across the street to the La Playa East or La Playa West parking lots, but that kind of defeats the purpose of them being close to their gear to watch it. And then we also worry about a lot of children who come to this event, kids and adults, running across the street and not using the crosswalk. So that kind of didn't work to put them over there. So this is kind of the only space where they can be close to their gear and keep it safe. I'm not sure if that's how it started. I'm not sure if that's much of the reason anymore. It's just kind of become what it is. But it is our only camping request that we get every year.
And they have done a good job of cleaning up after themselves, and they have done a pretty good job. I mean,
they do, and they rent porta potties from Marburg, and they do a good job of cleaning up. Yeah, it's never left in disrepair. You see more things happen with old, Fiesta than we do.
Right.
But that just goes in the planner, so that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got 2, and you already answered one of my questions. I wanted confirmation on what camping meant, and so it's overnighting in a vehicle. Is that what we're talking about?
That is correct. Overnighting in an RV, a Westfalia, along those lines. It's not car camping.
Gotcha.
But a tent also.
That's how it started out. We don't usually get those anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, people are bringing their RVs.
My other question is unrelated. From a revenue point of view, we're not making money on this. We'd be better off having it open and full with regular users than setting it aside and then having to put our resources into managing it. Is that true?
That is very accurate. Multiple times a day, parking spots turn over. If you are there the entire day for a parking space, you pay $12.
Right.
That's rarely the case. The best thing for us is people rotating in and out of there. We want everybody to enjoy, and that just means more people are coming down, enjoying the beach or the restaurants and things like that. So yes, this isn't, we make $3,600, but on a normal August weekend for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for those 100 spaces, we would make considerably more than that.
Gotcha. And we're putting our resources into managing it.
That's correct.
I'm not coming down on the event. I'm just trying to look at it from the dollars and cents.
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Is there a way to have them have somebody on site to deal with these parking issues?
Mr. Chair, we've done everything we can possibly do. We've had the organizer there before on a number of occasions, and some of these people just show up and it doesn't matter who's standing in front of them. And it is frustrating when it's our hourly staff. I mean, these are high school and college kids. Nobody deserves to be yelled at. Right. They're just doing their job. And folks come in early.
Yeah,
And it's hard to find when when you've got an RV and you're towing a
trailer.
boat behind it. It's
Yeah.
hard to find a place to park, so you settle in there, and they don't want to move. So it's been frustrating, and they recognize that, and they're trying to change that. But I think again, the bigger issue is just the summer season, the high point of our summer season, and
Right.
taking up those spaces for 3 entire days.
Just a last thing from me. I do appreciate your recommendation of asking them if they can move this beyond our busiest times, and I think, there's a lot of reasons that makes sense from our side. And I'll support this year, but I think going forward, that's a great recommendation.
So is it the staff's recommendation that we approve it this year and look at it next year?
Yes, it is. The staff recommendation is to continue to support the event this year, have it during its normal time frame, and we'll make it work again. And they are good people to work with. Again, we're not putting the organization itself down. It's coming a really tough time of the year. So in the future, what we'd like to do, and we're planning on doing, is let's keep it out of that
Right.
Memorial Day to Labor Day time frame. That's roughly 4 months. There's 8 other months we can make this happen with relative ease.
Yeah, I think as it said in the report, this has been going on for 23 years or something like that.
Long
This is
time.
not a new event, so, yeah. But maybe times have changed, as we pointed out here tonight, so. Okay. Would somebody like to make a recommendation on item B?
We'll move to accept the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So unanimous. Okay, and that brings us to commission staff communications. Do you have anything, Scott?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I do. As Brian alluded to, we're deep in budget season. I went to the Finance Committee and presented the fee increases that the Commission recommended last month on Tuesday. And then next Wednesday, we're all, managers and myself, we're all going to do our council budget work session. And that'll be here in the council chambers on Wednesday, starting at 9 o'clock. Airport goes first, waterfront second, and then solid waste third. So that'll be an in-depth look at the waterfront budget, and then they'll take it back and consider it and approve it later on in the month of June. Kind of on a related note, is we're having a lot of shoaling in the harbor right now, outside of the federal channel, which the Army Corps pays to dredge every year. So anything outside of the federal channel is the waterfront department's nickel to dredge, and we're getting shoaling inside the sandbar, encroaching on Marina One and that fairway there. We're getting it at the end of the rock crawling. But the biggest thing is what we call Bradley's Reef, which you may not be familiar with, but it's over towards the wharf. It's on the sort of the east side of West Beach, between West Beach and the wharf. And we've got it marked off with shoal buoys and so forth, but it comes up very steep and it's very shallow. Carl and I went out in a harbor patrol boat last week or the week before, and boy, you get out of the channel marker buoys and it's about this deep. We could see the sand ripples on the bottom. And it's not going to get any better. So Carl applied for a grant from the Division of Boating and Waterways, and we didn't get it. So we're going to try and reapply, but the soonest we could get that money would be the fall of 2019. So that's a long way away. And it's also a funds matching type of thing. So it would take considerable waterfront funds. So we're looking at, $600,000, $800,000 to knock that shoal down at this Bradley's Reef location. So we'll definitely report that out to the council at the work session. And we may try and allocate some funds out of reserves to do something this fall on our own, because we can't wait till 2019 and it's getting really bad.
Right.
So about every 10 years, we do a dredging project on West Beach to preserve the quiet water area, which is used by the sailors, the Santa Barbara Seashell Association, paddle boarders and all sorts of folks, non-motorized watercraft. So about every 10 years, we have a project in that area, and it's time. And it's also a hazard to navigation. People coming in at night, people going, just getting just a little bit outside those buoys and going aground. So just something to think about. And we'll definitely present it to the council next week.
Good. Anything on our side? Any updates on the smoking ordinance?
Mr. Chair, that went to council on the 9th. And the council recommended a pretty broad-based ban on smoking in the city. In parking lots, parking structures, public right-of-way. They allowed it in restaurants and bars with outdoor seating areas after 10 p.m. That was one exception. And banned it on the wharf. That's what our.
Right.
That's what our.
That was
we
my
had
question.
3 cigarette fires on Stearns Wharf last week in one day.
Yeah.
So that was really kind of what we were in it for. But beaches and parks, it'll be outlawed. And it's tricky to enforce, so it'll mostly be an educational kind of thing, and I think it'll bring about sort of a social change. It's not going to be police, telling people not to smoke. It's just as it becomes normal for people, they understand that they just can't smoke anywhere.
So when we talk about the wharf, the businesses that have outside seating will be allowed to have smoking in those buildings after 10 p.m. Is that
after 10 p.m. and that would be only the Harbor Restaurant on its upstairs deck.
right?
And I believe it's limited to 25% of the seating.
Okay. And then in the harbor, it would be Brophy's, and
I don't know that they allow smoking at all anyway, but the patio at Waterfront Grill,
right,
that sort
conceivably,
of thing.
yeah. That would be up to the individual business operator.
Correct.
So, okay. Yes, go ahead.
What kind of enforcement did they put along with that? If they're banning smoking on the beaches and so forth, and also on Stearns Wharf, is the waterfront supposed to enforce this?
Well, it would mostly be, it's an infraction if they decide to write a ticket for it. But again, it's mostly education, warning, and then if you have a real problem person, an enforcement type situation. But mostly we're going to have to get the education part of it out there through signs, pamphlets, that sort of thing. And it's particularly difficult on the wharf, which is visitor using, primarily used by visitors. And so everybody out there has never been out there before.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of people from other countries
Right.
and things like that. We tried designated smoking areas on
Right.
the wharf with a pamphlet in 4 or 5 different languages. And it mostly falls on our maintenance staff
Mm-hmm.
to say, hey, you can't smoke here. So on the wharf, it'll be primarily our maintenance staff.
I see.
But patrol, if they encounter a problem, then that could be one, an open container alcoholic beverage and then cigarette violation, something like that. Then they might add that on
Right,
or something.
right.
We're not going to go out looking, with our harbor patrol, limited harbor patrol. We're not going to go out looking for
Right.
that kind of thing.
Best
Can
use of resources.
can shop owners smoke within their businesses? Or?
I'm not sure on that. I don't think so. But what the council did was they unanimously directed the city attorney to start drafting the ordinance language.
see.
So we'll have to see what comes out of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor.
When do you anticipate the last day somebody could legally smoke on Stearns Wharf would be?
Well, let's see. If we give the attorney a month to draft up the ordinance, it takes 5 weeks for the ordinance to take effect. So we're probably talking 2-3 months at the very soonest.
Thank you, Scott. Anything else? All right, would someone like to move to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you, everybody.